One thing I know for sure, the most hardest thing to do on this planet as a human being is to authentically be yourself and share your story. I'm going to take some deep breaths before I share what I need to share, okay? I come on this live today as a mother. I come on this live today as a woman, as a spiritual woman, and as a physical woman. I come to share with you some of my most hardest times in my life, some of my most chaotic times in my life, some of my most lost times in my life, some of the most driest seasons of my life, but to also share with you how I got through that. How many of you that are out there suffering, being in a toxic relationship, whether it's your professional life or your personal life? A lot of people don't have the courage to even say, hey, I'm suffering. It takes courage to get up and speak. It takes courage to even experience toxicity, to experience abuse, and not say nothing about it. That's a different type of courage, of hiding, courage of allowing fear to take over. But I can tell you something today. Don't allow fear to take over your story, your life, your stage, your home. Today, I want to share with you my journey of surviving, my journey of thriving, my journey of saying no, my journey of finding what's healthy for me and what was not healthy for me. We hear about domestic violence all the time. And a lot of people take that very lightly. That's not something to be taken lightly. And excuse the marks on my shirt, I don't care about that right now. I care about what I have to say to you and what can help you that has helped me. I personally went on a journey of surviving emotional, mental, spiritual, intellectual, physical abuse. And it wasn't just in my home life, but it was also in my environment. Remember, there's always two sides to every story. There's two sides to everything. Everything that happens to us happens in pairs. And I would like to share with you how me escaping toxicity also became spiritual warfare. I was fighting for my spiritual life and my physical life. I was fighting for my kids' physical life and our spiritual lives. Many people out there know what it's like to fight physically for their family, for their friends, for somebody they love, to go put their hands on them. But what it's like to fight spiritually, it's totally different. It's nothing like the physical. Escaping a toxic marriage was probably one of the most hardest tests that God has ever placed in my life. Escaping toxicity. Do you know what toxicity is? Toxicity is someone diminishing your personality, diminishing who you are, not liking what you put on, not liking what you wear, trying to control your money, trying to control where you're going, always creating arguments. Your environment is full of chaos. That's toxic. And all my life, I grew up around this toxic environment, whether it was with family or friends, whether it was I was in the presence of children or in the presence of adults. All I saw was toxicity all around me. Then I was married into it by manipulation, control, gaslighting. As a mother, as a leader, as a spiritual woman, I fought with all my heart and my might, and I continue to this day. May 27th of 2016. I married someone because the church said, she's pregnant. I married someone because the church said, you are a harlot. I married someone because I was told if you don't do this, you can't be used by God in the temple. You can't do anything. I was told that physically. And growing up, like I grew up in the church, being taught how to live, who to date, where to go, I did it. Because growing up, I always wanted to be an obedient child. This isn't me growing up in church. I'm like, I gotta listen to my leaders. I gotta listen to what they're saying, or I'm gonna go to hell. That was one of the most biggest manipulative tactics that was ever used against my life since a child. Fear was pruned in me since a child. To be quiet, to not be myself, to do what the next person says do. And I did that for a long time. From the time I was 5 until I got up to about 30 years old, when I realized enough was enough. People, situations, circumstance, religions, they will force you into things that you know nothing about. I I took on this marriage. It started with an assault, which we'll talk about later. But I thought I was doing the right thing. And the first year came with the marriage. I saw some things and I ignored it. I prayed about it, but I ignored it. Ignoring an issue in your life, it will cost you time, it will cost you money, it will cost you your life pretty much, losing out on what you should be focusing on. I ignored when I first got into the relationship because of how I was raised to look at things a certain way. I was raised to think I could change a person by me, continue to be myself and praying for that person. You can't change no one that does not want to be changed, only yourself. So over a course of 10 years of being in this planned marriage, I thank God for my precious children that came out of this. Nothing's ever a mistake. Kids are not a mistake. Your pain is not a mistake. Your troubles, your suffering is not a mistake. What I went through was not a mistake. I did not deserve it, but it still was not a mistake. I'm not a mistake. You're not a mistake. How many out there can relate to decisions you have made about your life because the leaders above you or somebody with a title above you told you to do it? I did it. And it cost me losing my old self to find my new self. Over the course of 10 years, I started to realize year by year what was good for me and what was not good for me. I never had the model of what healthy love is or what a healthy relationship was because I was surrounded by so much toxicity. So every year that I was in this relationship, I took examination on myself, on my spouse, on my environment, trying to figure out what is a healthy marriage, what is a healthy relationship. And each year I realized how deeply unhealthy of a relationship I was in, forced into it. I asked people for help. I have asked family for help. I asked friends for help. I asked church leaders for help. I asked mentors for help. Friends of friends, associations of associations to help me with my own relationship, to help me with my marriage, to help me fix this person. You cannot fix a person. You can't have no one else to fix a person, only yourself. I had to allow myself to see each and every red flag year after year. It took me 5 times: 2015, 2020, 2022, 2023, and 2024 of staying consistent, of saying, you know what, enough is enough. When I realized I was being emotionally manipulated, psychologically manipulated, spiritually manipulated, gaslighting, making small, short comments, addictions that I personally cannot get rid of for that person. Whether I'm not even gonna say what addictions are, but being in a relationship, I suffered, and you might suffer, or may be suffering to your partner or your loved one, your boo thing, we thing, who thing, whatever thing. Could be struggling with addictions and it affects your life. The marriage I was in, my ex-spouse having addictions affected my life greatly, affected my kids' life greatly. Being lied to in a relationship hurts. I kept thinking that I was the problem every single year. No, I won't put the blame on the spouse anymore. I kept saying, okay, what am I doing wrong? I look for all the wrong things that I was doing. Stop looking for the wrong things that you are doing and find the right things you are doing. It took me 5 years of consistently saying, you know what? No. Hold on, y'all. Let me get my charger 1 second. And as I begin to talk, just relax, take some deep breaths. Some of what I have to say could be triggering. So it may trigger some emotions. Because man, oh man, I cried rivers, rivers, and rivers, and rivers, and rivers, escaping toxicity. I thought the tears would never end. It started with me accepting what someone says that my life should be or how it should go. Hold on, I'm gonna fix the light in here, y'all. 1 second. Just a moment, bear with me. I have some little difficulties here. I had to learn, being in an unhealthy relationship, what healthy was. While being married over a course of 7 years, I learned there were different versions of me that had to die, that had to leave because it was so much excess baggage. I had to realize what love really was by being placed in an unhealthy environment, unhealthy situation, unhealthy marriage. When the foundation is not sturdy in the beginning, do not think that the house will stand. When the foundation is not firmly built, a house will not stand. Think about the three little pigs in the story. Some built their house of straw, some built their house of sticks, some built their house of sand. My foundation started shaky in this relationship. But one thing about me, I've always been adaptable. Just because you're adaptable does not mean there's an excuse to be disrespected in a relationship. That's not an excuse. So I realized year after year in a toxic relationship, in a toxic marriage, I'm like, man, I'm overworked. I'm overburdened. I'm overstressed. Instead of constantly worrying about my problems, I was going to go get psychological help. I was going to get spiritual help. I was doing all of these things. I stopped focusing on the problem and started to find the solution. I kept wondering why certain feelings and emotions will always come up around my ex-spouse. That's because the foundation was never a firm foundation in the beginning. If your relationship or your marriage or whatever it is, whether it's personal, physical, spiritual, it has to be a strong foundation first. And when I married my spouse, I told him I said, God, I love God first. So this is why I'm able to even speak to you now on this live. My kids and I have suffered tremendously, emotionally, mental, psychological, spiritual, gaslighting, manipulation, theft, loss of items, loss of clothes, loss of things, countless times, loss of our home, loss of our vehicle. 5 times with escaping. It took me 5 times to keep going back into the same relationship to realize, was it for me or was it not? I hope it doesn't take you guys that long because sometimes going back, you don't always get to come out. And I would like to share you a story how each of my attempts of leaving a toxic relationship, marriage, circumstances, and environment, how I was constantly forced back into the situation systematically by community, by churches, by family, by friends, by association, by policing. I realized something so powerful about me growing up that I was rescuing so many people out of toxic marriages and relationships. They would call to me first. And now I realize many years later, now at 35, I have to use those same tools that I used to go rescue those people in their homes and their children and their possessions to pour that into myself. So don't feel bad for speaking out. Don't feel bad for sharing your story. I'm going to talk about my story, but I'm going to start it backwards on my last attempt. Remember, I told you I did it 5 times. So we'll start in, let's see, what year? Year 2015, I'll start there. After my son was born, I realized some characteristics and traits of my spouse, and I'm like, you know what? I don't think that's going to work for me. It was never a competition thing or compare and contrast thing. It was an importance thing, priorities that were important to me that may not be significantly important to my spouse. And when I realized that, I'm like, I can't carry a grown man and another grown man and myself and a newborn baby on my own. So I realized some toxic traits in my marriage, how I was constantly overworked, doing everything, whether it was getting resources, whether it was getting money, whether it was getting furniture or getting a place to live. I did it all, and that was very tiring. From day one, I came with the entire package, the entire resourceful mind, because of how I had to grow up. Resourceful mind, resourceful heart, thankfulness, just getting the job done. I was psychologically abused, constantly being shamed, body shame, physical shame. How many of you know that hurts? That hurts horribly. To throw out a strong woman, to throw out a prayer woman, to throw out a woman who really authentically loves. It took courage for me to leave each and every time. My son was a little baby, my first son, who was birthed out of an assault. No lie. When I was sexually assaulted back in 2014, I was accused of cheating. I was accused of being a whore. I was accused of being a slut. Name called. Nobody believed, not family, not friends. My ex-spouse shamed me the entire pregnancy, denounced the baby. It takes a lot of courage to say, hey, before I got married, I was sexually assaulted. In the marriage, is sexually assaulted. That takes a lot of courage. And people don't like when you leave situations and circumstances like that because they want you to stay in it. Well, I forgave that time in 2015. I said, you know what? I'm going to go get myself together because I don't like who I am in this marriage or relationship. I didn't like how verbally abusive the situation was in 2015. I didn't like how I was being treated, so I did something about it. But then 7 months later, I was, my spouse moved not too far from where I escaped to a shelter. And every day he came, stalking me every single day, telling me how you can't do it without a father. And what did I do because of my childhood story? I gave in. I said, we can move back in again. Even after noticing toxicity, even after accepting disrespect, even after all those things, my story then of fight and flight, of suffering toxicity, of knowing I didn't have a mom and a dad, back then, I said, okay, my child gotta have a mom and a dad. That was a form of manipulation. In this relationship, in this marriage I was in, it hurt me. But I wasn't strong then like I am now. And many people don't know I was running from that. Running from constantly being assaulted, whether it was physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, or sexually. So I stayed in the marriage for some more years. So that was 2015. 2016, I think we found an apartment. In 2017, each year we were moving. That was another red flag for me for instability in a relationship. My second son was conceived. I started to see more things. I started to do things that I personally wouldn't do for myself that I was doing for my spouse. But yet I ignored it because that's what love does. That's what growing up in church taught me to do. Just ignore it. It'll get better. Moving back in the following year, my spouse is a second child being born. We into the year 2016, 2017. I worked multiple jobs, 3 jobs. I would catch like 7 or 8 buses just to get to work. Suffered more verbal abuse. I noticed money would be missing. I noticed that I'm constantly on the phone calling for whether it was gas support, light support, food support. Anytime we were lacking, I was always there to find someone to help. I didn't like that in a relationship. It's not a one-way thing. And a relationship is spiritual and physical. You shouldn't just be working on your physical, but your spiritual too. That was important for me. Now I know what it's like to be unequally yoked. But I didn't know then. I had to forgive myself for what I did not know. People will really show you who they are. I was forced into a relationship with a person I really didn't even know myself. I just trusted my faith and my spiritual abilities to get through it. Doesn't mean I should suffer or you should suffer. But it took me 5 times to escape. And each time I was forced back. But each time I was forced back, I was able to get stronger and stronger. And God was able to help me see physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually what was happening. So while suffering physical abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, I just kept praying and saying, it'll get better. This person will change. Even when this person would tell me words and different things, would send me text messages, and I changed this and I changed that, but the behavior 2 months later, 3 months later, collapsed. That's not consistency. That's not love. When your loved one tell you that they're changing, this don't even have to be a romantic relationship. It could be your family, it could be your friends, it could be your work environment. I got tired of being misused, abused, manipulated, gaslighted, giving my things away because of how giving I was. As a mother, I started to see, my importance is my children. My priority is my children, is myself. People will make you feel bad for making you a priority, and I paid the price for it. Each escape came with the price. A price of losing, whether it was my physical possessions, emotional wear and tear on my mind, breakdown with my heart. So I moved back in with my spouse, and we had a second child, and life was still going. But I still found myself doing the same things. It was like a cycle. Whether we were struggling to get by, did not have enough, whether I was calling people for help, that was unhealthy to me. That was unacceptable to me. Becoming the bigger person every single time. Accepting the behavior as love, whether it was toxic, whether it was an addiction, whether it was something physical, mental, spiritual. I was used as a cover up for a long time in a relationship, the marriage I was in. Took my kindness for a weakness, my giving for a weakness, my prayer life for a weakness. Not knowing later on that I would be plotted on, lied on, worked against with my spouse and others who have known me. Escaping abuse is not easy. Escaping emotional abuse is not easy. Physical abuse is not easy. Escaping sexual abuse is not easy. It wasn't easy for me, but I had to, through my relationship with myself and with God, through my determined prayer life, I got through each encounter of betrayal, each encounter of being lied on, each encounter with rumors, each encounter with being assaulted. Each year I forgave and said, you know what? I forgive you, you could come back. I did that 5 times in a row. And each time I attempted to escape again. Society, friends, family, community, environments constantly forced us back. So when my second son was born, I noticed more behaviors of addictions, me not feeling my best in the relationship, me looking at myself and body shaming myself to make me feel accepted to my spouse according to his addictions and needs and wants. That was not healthy for me. After I had my daughter, This is the third child. 2018 comes around. I asked God for a plan, and I kept asking God for a plan for years. And I said, Lord, I don't want toxicity in my life. I don't want to live the remaining of my years walking and living in toxicity. It was killing me emotionally, mentally, spiritually, intellectually. Just constantly struggling, constantly on the go, constantly in the state, the fight or flight state, fleeing or in some dire emergency situation. When you are in a relationship with someone, it comes with attachments. People got spiritual and physical attachments. I dealt with both. And I asked God for a plan. So after my daughter was born, an old friend I had to speak to back then, we were good friends for over 20 years, said, if God gave you a word, I'm on board with it. And that was one thing that was always taking advantage of my faith. People around me, the relationship I was in, knew that my faith was something I've never played with. It's not a game. It has been my lifestyle, but also was used as a weakness. I've always trusted God from day one. So I called my spouse when I got this word. I wasn't in the state at the time. After I had my daughter, I began to ask God for a plan in 2018. And God told me to move upstate where it was cold and freezing. I'm like, God, are you sure? And I couldn't even go to sleep about it. I called my spouse and I said, you know what? God gave me a word. And he said it was time to leave. So here I am getting my spouse from the time I got with them to the time we started having children, before we even left the state where we were living in. Forgiving, forgiving, forgiving. Trusting God for new plans. So I trusted God for that plan. I didn't know what was going to happen with that plan, but I trusted God. I had to let go everything I had knew, where I had came from, to come and adapt to somewhere totally cold, totally different, but also trust God. I was 2 months postpartum and I trusted God. I had came back home and I cleaned my entire apartment. And I said, God, I trust you. Trusting God can be very scary sometimes. And I'm going to stop that right here and come back. I'll just keep it on. Trusting God can be very scary. I took my 2-month-old daughter, my 4-year-old and 2-year-old son, and my ex-spouse at the time. We got on the plane, sold everything we knew, everything we had, and came to a brand new state. I came to the state without anything, no money, no job, no nothing, just a whole word of faith. But it put me in a situation. It put me in a situation of homelessness. It put me in a situation of distrust. I was lied to. It put me and my children and my family out in the open, vulnerable to needing help. But I still trusted God every step of the way. So escaping toxicity in a toxic marriage came with the cycles of homelessness, losing jobs, losing transportation. That does not feel good, but my faith stayed the same. So in 2018, we moved up to a whole other state of Illinois. And a friend told me, you know what, the same person that told me I could come live with them and, create a new life in the new state of Illinois we are at the time, dropped the ball on my heart. And not just me, but dropped the ball on my children. And I'm doing my best to hold back my tears because I've cried so many and I can't cry anymore. We were forced into a physical state of fight and flight for our lives. Freezing cold. I got on that phone. My spouse did nothing. Like literally, I watched him do nothing but hold the kids and watch me work. I got on the phone and I called everything, everywhere, The state of Illinois we had just came to is out of different states, calling shelters everywhere to get us warm and get us to safety. And at that time, they had something called the pads, and there were churches where you go lay down and you sleep on these pads. I was so unsure. People will make you doubt your faith. I got off that plane, I felt the spirit of anger. And I said, God, why would you have me come to a whole other state for someone to drop the ball on me like that? I'm trying to recreate a life of healthiness, whether it was in our environment, our emotions, our spiritual surroundings, getting us out of toxicity, creating a life that I desire for me and my family. I called all over towns, near and far. And one day we were stranded in a cold downtown Naperville area in Illinois, and I called. I said, you know what, I gotta do something I don't want to do, even though I'm afraid they might take my kids. That was another thing that was used against me, escaping domestic violence or just escaping a toxic marriage, is the fear of my kids getting taken and using DCFS or CPS or whoever you want to call it, those who take children. But I built up the courage that day, and I called and I said, listen, these are all the places I've called. These are the people I have spoken to. The cop was in awe. I had just come from the state of Florida to the state of Illinois. I was only here for about a week. And he said, how did you know about all these resources? I said, because I called around everyone that I knew. And immediately God began to work on our behalf through that police officer, through the community, through the churches. Things started to come into place as I called for help. Well, again, I watched myself being resourceful. I watched myself doing the work. My spouse and I ended up getting a job. He got a job at the hospital. I got a job at the daycare that was right around the corner. The church helped us. The community helped us. The police helped us. I was so grateful who all God used to help me have a new beginning. But there was a sad part to that and a victory part to that too. It was the same people that was used when we first got here to the state of Illinois were the same people who were used to keep me in this toxic cycle and relationship. And I'm going to share with you how I broke that. It took a lot to be homeless with no vehicle, coming in the cold. It took a lot to not turn back around and go to Florida and tell everybody, oh, my plan went up, when it blew up. My friend said she couldn't. I didn't do any of that. I didn't turn around. I kept going forward and I kept praying on that plane. I said, God, how can someone that say they love you treat you like that, God? How can someone? I just questioned God, but I also trusted him at the same time. So God provided housing for us through the community, through the churches, through support. And I went about doing what I always know best, is being a mother, taking care of my responsibilities, making sure we had physical needs provided for, and everything provided for, whether it was doctor, everything. I started getting interviews at jobs. This is me having no vehicle, by the way, in the snow, not with the proper shoes or anything, just putting the metal to the pedal, getting it done because I have a family to take care of. Well, things end for us at the hotel when we had first got here, and God made a way. We went to go stay with a friend when the vortex first came, until we found our first apartment, which I found. That's another thing in this relationship. In toxic relationships, I was the only one finding stability and bringing all the furniture and anything we ever needed in. While this person just felt like, hey, I'll just give this much and that is enough. Over time, escaping toxicity taught me to really find true value in myself and appreciate the valuable person that I am. But when you escape a toxic relationship, whether it's personal or professional, it will take from you. It will rip from you who you are. So we got into the state of Illinois, we worked, we did all those things. And again, moving back into apartments, our own place, I found the same cycle. I found the same lies. I found the inconsistency within myself. I found myself paying for friendships for people to be around me because I didn't feel, certain place at home. I took the personality and the behavior that I was carrying from back home and I brought it with me, which did not help me. So I realized getting our own apartment in a new state, the same behaviors, whether it was addictions, whether it was not paying attention to me, whether it was lies, whether it was loss of money. I found myself again calling upon resources. How do I better my life? Whether it was financially, emotionally, mentally, or physically, I was always looking for ways, how do I better my life? Because the situation I'm in, it does not feel good. It does not feel better. It does not feel best. I experienced pain that did not feel good each attempt. So here we are in our own apartment between the year of 2018 and 2019. 2019 rolls around, I still notice just different behavior patterns that I did not like. And I said, you know what? I need healing. I need separation. I need to remove myself from this situation to see if I really want this relationship because I keep seeing the same behavior patterns that's not helping me or the relationship in general. People they will gravitate to you for just what you can do for them. And I would tell other people growing up, while I was with my ex-spouse, I was saying, I feel like this person's connected to me because of things I can do or the umbrella of my faith. It was true. Don't convince somebody else of something that you already know. And I had to continue to convince myself of what I knew to be true, what toxicity really is because I was raised in it, and then married into it. I started signing up for school when I got up here. I started applying for jobs. I started applying for housing. I started applying for transportation. Got it all. While that person just worked that one job. Not work on themselves mentally, emotionally, not work on their inner demons, their inner turmoil, childhood trauma. My ex-spouse came with a lot of childhood trauma, a lot of unanswered questions, unanswered everything. And the kids and I suffered emotionally from that, psychologically from that. So when I realized in the year 2018 to the 2020 pandemic had just come and all of that, I told my spouse, I said, I gotta go again. I need to go get the space I need to heal and realize what works for me and what does not work for me. I gave my spouse my vehicle. I called all these apartments. I said, you know what? You gotta work. Let me do this. Go to work. I don't want you to miss your job. Called like over 20 apartments and said, I'll help you, with the transition. I'm not, don't want this to be something bad, but good. But nope. When that separation happened, I was separated from my spouse for about 7 or 8 months, not even a year. I was stalked. I was constantly being called to be intimate with, constantly being played with my mind. Oh, you can't do this without me. We need our family. The same words that were being used consistently over the years. When I began to outgrow those lies and outgrow the same pattern, the more I began to work on myself. I started going to get counseling and therapy and different things like that. I even tried that same year when I separated from my spouse. I had got into my own apartment through a program that had denied us when we first got up here and helped me again when I knocked on their door. And in that moment, I had 3 small kids. It was a pandemic. I kept losing jobs because I had caregiving jobs that were very high in the market, but also very high at losing jobs because people were dying and so many things were happening. I was suffering, I was suffering escaping a marriage, marital abuse. I was suffering the separation from family and friends back home. I was suffering from religious abuse. And at this time, before I went into the program, they do assess you for everything. So I was assessed for PTSD, anxiety, and PTSD, anxiety, and depression. Being a strong woman really take a toll on you. And that year, I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna take some trazodone pills and just go to sleep. Well, guess what? I didn't fully make that attempt that year. I called my mentors and I said, excuse me, I need help. And that was the first time in my life I was like, oh my God, I don't want to be like my family. I don't want to be like my friends. It is not something that you're going to be like the next person for going to get help. It's okay to realize when something's not right with yourself to go get the help. So I went to go get mental help because I thought that was the problem. This is like the third attempt escaping my spouse. Well, when that happened, and I stayed in the hospital for a week, the kids had to be watched by their father. When I got out the hospital, y'all, my spouse was sitting at my apartment that we were supposed to be separated from. And he says, really? Really? You want to take your life? Really? You really thought about that? Pour more pain. I mean, it was just going at it, like making me feel delusional about my choices and my thoughts, knowing that's not something I really wanted. That's how I was feeling, overly frustrated, right? So I did outpatient program. I did outpatient program. I did in-house therapy because I said I don't want to ever attempt something like that. Excuse me, y'all. I don't want to ever attempt something like that in my life again, ever, because I knew how valuable I was as a mother, as a friend, how valuable I've always been to my past, to families, to friends, to communities. But this relationship made me feel like I was delusional. I had people always tell me what to do. Even the program that I was in was telling me I shouldn't leave my spouse because this is what's best for the kids. Well, 6 years later, the same behavior continued, and I had to do something about it. I had to stay in the situation or do something about it. You have the right to do something about it. And this is where my story will continue. And I will talk about the attempts that I made to leave a toxic marriage and a toxic relationship 5 times, who I asked for help, when I asked for help, what happened to me and my kids when we did ask for help. I hope I said something that encouraged you, and I hope I said something that uplifted you. I will be back with more of escaping toxicity spiritually and physically, because it's just not a physical thing, it is a spiritual thing. The Bible says we don't wrestle against flesh and blood alone, but against principalities and spiritual wickedness in high places. When I married my spouse, he met me in church. He already knew what I was about. But I was weakened in a part of me, in my brain, in my mindset. There was only one way that I thought of things. Well, I thank God for stripping that away from me. It is okay to go get help if you are suffering domestic violence, whether you are a man or a woman. And domestic violence does not have to be physical. It's more of the emotional that will affect your physical. Physical, emotional, psychological, mental. I was called crazy for going to get help. Then it was used on me later as leverage. That's painful for a mother to suffer and a children and a child to suffer, and let alone my children. My children saw how strong their mother was then and see how strong that I am now. To be placed back into a cycle 5 different times only to come out stronger and really get myself out of it. It takes courage to speak on the truth. It takes courage to stand up for yourself. I had nobody being my voice. I had nobody protecting me. I had nobody believing me. I just knew what I wanted for my life. I knew what was toxic and not toxic for me and my children. You know what's best for you. Your family doesn't know what's best for you. Your friends don't know what's best for you. You can take their advice, but at the end of the day, you have to apply whatever principle or advice that you have heard in your life. And I always apply the principle of somebody else's advice or word in my life over my life. No one knows your situation and circumstance until they're actually in a situation and circumstance. May you be encouraged, may you be uplifted. I hope I said something again that encouraged you and helped you to come out of toxicity, whether it's physical, personal, or spiritual. Be back for more, and I'll share more of my story of escaping toxicity spiritually and mentally, emotionally, physically, escaping a toxic marriage physically and spiritually. Because it takes a different type of mindset to escape. And that's physical and spiritual. Love you much. Hope I said something that helped you.